Now I will introduce our final speaker on the panel. It's Huma Dar. So Huma Dar's paternal family was ethnically cleansed from Srinagar in Kashmir in 1948 for demanding plebiscites under the UN resolutions. Her maternal family, exiled from Kashmir after accepting Islam during the Dogra regime, fought for independence from the British. With an interdisciplinary background in South Asian studies with emphasis in gender, women's, and sexuality studies and film studies, Huma has lectured in the departments of gender and women's studies, ethnic studies, and South Asian studies at UC Berkeley, but also at California College of the Arts and San Francisco State University, among many others. Huma's work is focused on the intersections and co-formations of race, religion, class, caste, gender, sexuality, and national politics of South Asia and South Asian diasporas, and on intellectual and political activism for social justice, especially in Indian-occupied Kashmir. For her published work, her writing at Pulse Media, her stellar activism on Kashmir, and as co-founding member as Muslim Identities and Cultures, a group that Huma co-founded. Please see her bio. She has a longer bio on the Decolonizing Sexualities website under Decolonial Cafe, but she also has a whole lot of things going on the internet, and I encourage you to really explore further the amazing work of Huma and of all of our speakers. Thank you. Huma, will you please begin?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that very lovely introduction and introducing the word stellar and all of that, which I never put in there. So thank you for that. Thank you to the whole.
I'm sorry, I elaborated a bit for you, my dear Huma.
I know. To our Decolonial Sexuality Network, to the Decolonial Cafe. Thank you and congratulations for the 10th year. And I want to start actually with land acknowledgement. As an indigenous Kashmiri fighting against Indian occupation, but even if we were not fighting occupation, I live on this land. I eat of the abundance of this land. I have raised my 2 kids on the fruit of this land. I stand with, I stand behind, I think with my friends, my siblings, my ancestors and nibblings of the Oloni people, whose bounty makes it possible for me to be here today. And I have a slideshow for everyone here that, and I would actually also like to really put it in conversation with both Ines's talk and Wala's and Haneen's excellent presentation, because it has made me think further, and I thank you for that. So just like the animus of or animus of the Palestinian, the occupation of Palestine by Israel is a certain form of Zionism, a Zionist supremacy. And just like white supremacy is co-eval, co-terminal with the settler colonial project of on the Turtle Island, in the same way, the occupation of Kashmir, the animus, the ideology that animates this violence of settler colonialism is Brahminical supremacy. And here is the, here's the the black and white image at the back is an image from the 1970s of Bharat Mata, or Mother India. And if you can see behind, there is you can see she's actually superimposed on the map, on the geographical map of South Asia. Her head coincides, superimposes on where Kashmir would be, and her arms bearing various weapons and even a lotus flower and a rosary are heading towards Pakistan on the western side, and heading towards Bangladesh on the eastern side. On that particular image, I've actually imposed a picture, a photograph from a milestone that actually exists on the way from India to Kashmir. And it says, Kashmir is the crown of India. So for those of us who have studied British colonialism, and we know that India was called the crown of the Raj, or the jewel of the crown. This smacks of colonialism through and through. On the left side are this one here, Mission Kashmir. It's a poster from a Bollywood film, which I have argued in my work, functions as an ideological arm of constructing Kashmir as desirable and Kashmiris as killable. This particular image here, oops, is and I'll talk about it a little bit further in the talk, is a photograph, a photoshopped photograph of a freedom fighter called Burhan Wani, who was extrajudicially killed in July 2016 by the Indian state. On the left here, this bottommost image is from a fashion show called Kashmiriyat, or Kashmiri-ness, held by two Indian designers in their cosmopolitan city of Mumbai. Here, if people know a little bit about the caste hierarchy, the top three castes are considered the clean castes, or called savarnas, and I don't want to call them upper caste because, or I always want to put quotation marks around them because they're not upper and no one else is lower, but that's the way they are constructed. So I would rather call them savarnas, which is the local term used within India, or the oppressor castes. And the top and the bottom two castes, the Shudras, or the Bahujans, as we like to call ourselves today, which means majority of people, and the erstwhile untouchables, or the Dalits, as they prefer to be called, are the castes that were traditionally considered unclean, and I prefer the terms the oppressed castes. So when I say Brahminical supremacy, I do not imply that the Brahmins, less than 3% of South Asia, less than 3% of all of Jammu and Kashmir, are the only ones. It means anyone who is invested in maintaining this structure of hierarchy. Just like you do not have to be white to be a supporter of white supremacy, just like you do not have to be Israeli Jewish person to be a supporter of Zionism. In very much the same way, you do not have to be Brahmin to be integral to the support of Brahminical supremacy. Here's the map of South Asia, the geographical map, and here's that same figure side by side to show you how the overlapping of the figure works. This figure, the form of the goddess herself is very much Brahminical. It belongs to the oppressor caste. She's figured like Durga, the goddess from Bengal, and she is a Brahminical goddess. These are not the kind of gods and goddesses that were worshipped by the majority of the indigenous peoples, the Dalits, the Bahujans in South Asia. I argue in the rest of my work, and I will skip over it for right now, but that the land itself was constructed as pornotropic, as a locus of desire in Indian cinema, which is crucial. It's critical to the construction of the Indian nation, the imaginary of the Indian nation, unlike a novel or media, as Benjamin Anderson suggested, because of the literacy levels in India, as well as the popularity of the films. And we can again go back to it later on, or I can send you these links. The construction of the Kashmiri Muslim male, who had always been absent in Indian cinema, and the first time he makes a presence, an entry into Indian cinema, is after the armed guerrilla movement starts, after the armed form of the freedom movement starts. Only then he enters into the Bollywood imaginary, and then, of course, as the terrorist, this villainous, ugly inside-out character and vis-a-vis also the erotics of Indian Brahminical colonialism. This particular song is from, or clip is from a film called Roja, which can veritably be called as the begin, and the beginning of the discussions on these films can be argued to be the beginning of critical discussion on Indian cinema, period. Um, and there are other versions of the Kashmiri male as well, where he starts off as a terrorist. For example, here in the top left corner, a big hunk, but then he is somehow domesticated into Brahminical colonial patriarchy and infantilized, and his anger is shown to be that of revenge, which can just be squelched via gentle loving by the Indian state. Here we are looking at representations of Burhan Wani. Burhan Wani was a 22-year-old Kashmiri young man who was killed in July 2016, and he was very skilled at using social media in particular ways to show his resistance. And after he was killed, these were the kind of photoshopped images that were very popular in Indian discourses, especially I was targeted with a lot of these images because on Twitter and Facebook, I was talking about it as an extrajudicial killing. And I'm arguing here that there is a transphobic trancing that is happening here. And by colonial transphobic trancing transformation, what I mean is that the core of this ideology is transphobic, and they look down on trans people. So when they are converting Burhan Wani via photoshopping into this trans person, they are in their transphobic imaginary, they are degrading him. So this is, and which is similar to the operation of emasculation. So Kashmiris have been colonized since 1586, first by the Mughals, then by the Afghans, then by the Sikh regime, and then by the Dogra regime, and then finally now by the Indian state. So over a period of 435 years, it has been amply documented, the process of emasculation. And by emasculation to the extent that some travelers would say, that Kashmiris are not men. They're not men enough. And so the school that the missionaries opened in Kashmir, in Srinagar, Bisco School, its motto was, "In all things be men." And again, this emasculation is premised on a very misogynist conception of the world, where to be a woman is to be degraded, and therefore converting a man into a woman, feminizing a man, is a process of degradation. Here is a comparison to actually the Palestinian film, Sharif Waqed's 2003 film called Sheik Point, where he mocks the underbelly of the Israeli homosexual colonial gaze, whereas in India, I am arguing that that self-reflexivity is not available to the left liberal Indians. And instead of that, what we see is a fashion scene where they unreflectively show the violence of Indian colonialism, and they fetishize the male Muslim body, the maimed, the violated, the bruised male Muslim body as an object of fetish. And this particular fashion show called Kashmiriyat or Kashmiriness occurred just a couple of months after the judicial killing of Burhan Wani, following which there were massive protests in all of Kashmir, and more than 150 people were killed by the Indian occupying forces, including the blinding of more than 800 youth. So this has been talked about as the history's first recorded mass blinding of citizens. And here, in a very non-ironic Freudian slip, this reveals the homosexualizing and violently pornographic Indian colonial gaze. So there was a fashion, the makeup person, and this was on Twitter, was the caption for the photograph was, "Backstage pass, Sonic Sarvate creates a bullet palette effect for Shantanu and Nikhil's Kashmiriyat collection. MAC Cosmetics Fashion Night." They had fashion models with blinders on their eyes. They had fashion models parading around with gags around their faces. So a little reminiscent of BDSM without consent. And that lack of consent is critical to the occupation. The lack of consent is critical to this particular demeaning fetishization. And the lack of consent is underlies the genocide that is happening in Kashmir right now under Indian occupation. So look, some of these captions are very, very revealing. So here is one that says, "Even as he speaks nothing, his eyes are a reflection of desire, aspiration, and hope. Kashmiriyat at GQ Fashion Nights last night." I will, so here are Kashmiri journalists who are who were under gag for those 6 months. Out of those 3 months, Kashmir had no internet, even way back in 2016. And these are journalists. Many of them are actually friends of mine. And this is what's happening on a fashion show. So gags as censorships and gags as sexy fashion fetish. So I argue that this is how left liberal or urban India is involved in fashioning the Indian colonial fantasy and glorification of colonial violence. We jump now to 5th August 2019, when India annexed Kashmir unilaterally and imposed lockdown on Kashmir, which an internet lockdown, no telephones, no landline, no nothing, for which in some way or another has lasted to this month, so 19 months. There was absolutely no internet for the first 5 or 6 months. Then the very basic 2G network was started, which is 20,000 times slower than what we are using, which is the 4G network, which meant that the students, there were no schools, there were curfews, there were shoot to kill curfews, and school kids have been out of schools for 2 academic years, because even when the internet schooling could start, they could not avail of it because 2G network takes 15 minutes to download a single email. So it wasn't possible for them to be schooled via Zoom like we have been doing here in the last 1 year. So at that point, there were many different reactions, and these are reactions from some of the queer groups in India. So here, this is a Queer Hindu Alliance, and they posted this particular photograph. So it's again a colonial map of India, because over here they have annexed all of Jammu and Kashmir, which is a disputed area. It's a contested region, even according to the United Nations. Kashmir is actually the earliest international dispute under consideration at the United Nations. And in 1948, the UN Resolution 47 asks for a plebiscite to take place on Jammu and Kashmir for the people to exercise their inalienable right to self-determine. And we noticed that there is a saffron-colored turban placed on top of the head. It is still considered the head, which in the Brahminical framing constitutes a very particular message in Brahminical supremacy. So one of the myths is that from the head of this ideal Purusha, an ideal the god, from the head emerged the Brahmins, From the torso emerged the Kshatriyas, or the warrior, the Rajas and the Rajputs. From the legs emerged the Vaishyas, the traders, the merchants, the money makers, the money lenders. And from the feet, the part of the body that touches the ground, emerged the Chudras, or the Bahujans, or the majority of people. And the Dalits, the erstwhile untouchables, are actually considered even beyond the pale of the god's body. So here, with this dressed up in a saffron turban on top of the colonized Jammu and Kashmir, and the borders of it are going into a little bit into Pakistani territory, and then around and embracing Bangladesh as well. It is very telling of the Brahminical supremacist nationalism that this particular group embodies. And on the right, so at that point in August 5, on August 5th, 2019, when there were two articles that were abrogated or derogated. One was Article 370, which maintained a fig leaf of autonomy for Jammu and Kashmir that was occupied by India. And the other one was Article 35A, which allowed the Jammu and Kashmir Congress or Parliament to decide who is its citizen, and the purchase of immovable property or land was only for those considered citizens or subjects of Jammu and Kashmir. By lifting off the 35A, the settler colonialism has started as if on steroids. And you can see some of these memes and advertisements in the newspapers that started occurring immediately. So it's property dealers, and this is Jammu and Kashmir. And this is me and my boys on our way to buy properties in Kashmir. You have a mafia-like image, but this is these are the shown to be the billionaires of India. And this one says, "Koi ab tak chua nahi ka." So it means, has no one touched you so far, right? I mean, this rape fantasy of India vis-a-vis Jammu and Kashmir is so was written through and through in its gaze, in its and overtly celebrated. And here is Modi with Ambani, Dhirubhai Ambani, and it's Modi saying, "Ye pooch raha hai Kashmir kharid lu kya ab?" So he's asking, should I buy Kashmir now? So as if, the conquest mentality, let's go get them, let's go get their women. And there were memes, and there were statement by the chief minister of an adjoining state, Haryana, who said, "Okay, guys, men, now go to Kashmir and get yourself lighter skinned women from Kashmir. You have my blessings to do that." And the same imperial colonial fantasy of women as objects of loot for a conquering country. This is from January last year, January 2020, at the queer marches that occur in India, when and the slogan of Kashmiri freedom, which one of a very popular one is "Hum kya chahte azadi." What do we want? Freedom. And then it's played upon and added to in different ways. That got hijacked and appropriated by Indian groups, including colonial groups. So this is here a posting from the Queer Azadi Mumbai Pride, February 2020. "We are Queer Azadi, a collective organizing body, permissions team of the Mumbai Pride Solidarity Gathering 2020, conducted on Saturday, February 1st at Azad Maidan. We completely dissociate ourselves from and strongly condemn the abrupt radical slogans in support of Sharjeel and or other slogans against the integrity of India at the gathering." So Sharjeel is a reference to Sharjeel Usmani, who is an Indian Muslim, and he was protesting against the Islamophobic laws, CAA, NPR, NRC, that had been promulgated in India in December 2019, which kind of allows a refugee status and a quicker way to citizenship for all but Muslim refugees from 3 countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. And in read in conjunction with the National Public Registry and the National Registry of Citizens, where you have to prove your grandfather's papers that you belong to India. And if you don't have such papers, you will be considered as a non-citizen, which obviously discriminates against the dispossessed, the poor people who do not have any property papers to show, as well as against, so it discriminates. And if you are a non-Muslim, you could still be considered a refugee from a neighboring country and still get on a fast track to citizenship. But if you're Muslim, that's it. In Assam, which is a state in the northeast of India, they've already constructed detention camps for 1 million people, and there 1.9 million people have been pointed out as not having those papers to prove their citizenship. And the second reference about these slogans against integrity of India at the gathering is precisely that there were a few people who made the righteous slogan of that Kashmir should be given freedom from India. And those people were arrested. So here I've blackened out the dead name and of one of this amazing activist and ally who was initially absconding, and then they were arrested. And so the Queer Azadi Mumbai, the organizing umbrella unit, was distancing itself both from the Indian Muslim activist and from those who raise slogans for Kashmiri freedom. So that's how compromised the queer movement in the majority mainstream queer movement in India is. However, that does not mean that everyone is compromised. And I will show you a little bit about very righteous alliance and solidarity we have received. Here is a reference to, this is, so secular Brahminical pinkwashing, Marxists will never do a caste analysis of Kashmir. So a couple of months before that, this was the headline of an article in Times of India. A Kashmiri couple wants their identity. And it's a Kashmiri Brahmin man who is giving an interview. And I know that Sandeep Bakshi, you'll remember this incident particularly, who says he's married to this younger Kashmiri Muslim guy who is his husband, and they are participating in the square march in Delhi, but they're unable to go back to Kashmir and be themselves, which is queer. Turned out, and then this article was posted on Facebook. Turned out that the younger person was actually not only not his husband, he was not a partner of this older Kashmiri Brahmin man either. In fact, he had no relationship with that guy, except that the older Kashmiri Brahmin is an established artist, and because of his Brahminism, he gets doors opened for him left, right, and center. And the Kashmiri, the younger man, is a student is an art student, and he kind of really revolted against this article. He has not come out, so we don't know whether he's queer or not because he's not come out. And so 2 days later, this link so no longer works because this is what appears when you click on that link. It says this story has been removed on the request of the respondents featured in it, citing their security concerns. So a greater demonstration of Islamophobia I cannot imagine. Instead of saying that the interviewee had lied, had made false statements, false report, they put in this little erratum saying that, hinting at greater security concerns in Kashmir. So it's a statement of pinkwashing. Here was the critical pushback from the trans margins. So this is a blog that I really appreciated by SV Ambu Kotaram. And they say that the true trans histories, I believe, are present in each city where today Savarna, cis queer NGOs have taken charge as gatekeepers. In Bombay, Mumbai, as asserted by Disha Pinky Sheikh, that history is part of the history of Dalit Panthers. And that is the history of trans people who lived in, migrated to, struggled, and resisted in the city. I celebrate that irrespective of having a flag or a day. I celebrate that in silence and in my prayers. And I celebrate that irrespective of whether today's Savarna queer and trans people consider me trans enough or not. Mumbai pride is not to be reclaimed. It is to be dismantled and destroyed. Is from a blog piece that is again no longer available. And it points to the impossibility of speech as an always already queered person. And really, and thinking about it, even as Haneen and while I were talking, I was thinking that how, they correctly argued that pink washing is a violence on the Palestinian occupied queer body in the same way, and that it erases their future. So in Kashmir, they're happening all at the same time, except that the colonial queer-phobic queering and the colonial transphobic transing are tools of the right wing, the more orthodox, the Hindu nationalist part of Brahminical supremacy. And they make speech very difficult. They boost particular kinds of indigenous patriarchy, and they erase the past and the present. And they render speech impossible. And in reaction to that kind of boosted indigenous patriarchy, pink washing comes in and sucker punches them on the right side. So this colonial, transphobic, queerphobic, queering and transic punches from one side, and pink washing comes in and punches the Kashmiri occupied queer body from the other side, leading to an impossibility of speech, an impossibility to resist outrightly. So here is a blog post from a Kashmiri queer activist who has published about trans people in Kashmir and queerness in Kashmir. This was posted in November 2019, so a couple of months after the annexation of Kashmir by India, and it was removed soon afterwards. Luckily, I had saved the entire blog, and I will not mention their name precisely for their safety, but what they say is pink washing cannot overshadow our daily experiences of humiliation, harassment, and ceaseless human rights violations. Sexual orientation and gender expression do not exist in a vacuum. To safeguard these rights, it should first recognize the basic right to life, freedom with worth and dignity, and right to self-determination. In Kashmir, unfortunately, all these basic rights are infringed upon on a daily basis. And it has also given rise to there are queer groups. There are called queer groups. There are actually no one in the group is queer on Facebook, on social media, and they wanted to hold events in Kashmir post annexations when no Kashmiri could actually come out in the streets. They wanted to hold events, and so it's an attack on Kashmiris from all sides, where just to stay alive is an act of resistance. So even though this particular blog got taken away, I know that they're alive and they're well, and that is all that matters for right now. To exist is to resist, because they want us annihilated. They want us gone. In the last since May of last year, less than a year, they started giving domicile certificates to Indians to come and settle in Kashmir. And under Indian occupation, the population of Jammu and Kashmir is less than 13 million. within 9 months, 3.38 million people, so more than 25% of the existing population, have been given domicile certificates by India. And that is the reason we are on genocide alert by the Genocide Watch. And I request all of you actually to not just engage with this as an intellectual talk that you heard and you saw, but to be there for us and stand in alliance, because we're facing an absolutely incredibly immensely hard time right now. Thank you for your time. Thank you for organizing this conference and this panel. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Huma. Thank you for everything. And I'd like to thank all of the other panelists. That was our concluding presentation. And now I want to first remind the audience not to record or photograph. We had said it at the beginning. I'd like to just reiterate it again right now. For those who have accepted to be recorded, their recordings will be on the Decolonizing Sexualities Network.org website as soon as we can get them on. But some people prefer not to be recorded for a multiplicity of reasons, and which I will not go into. And so those, we will not have the recordings, and please refrain from recording. Thank you. To respect the wishes of our presenters.